Barry Morphew claimed he had nothing to do with his wife Suzanne's disappearance, but when her body was found buried in a remote Colorado forest, his past unraveled fast. What began as a husband pleading for help turned into a chilling tale of secrets, deleted data, and a fingerprint on Suzanne's broken necklace that told a story Barry never expected would be heard. Suzanne Morphew's disappearance began like something out of a movie, calm, sunny, and deeply unsettling. On May 10, 2020, Mother's Day, she was reported missing by a neighbor after her daughters couldn't reach her. Suzanne had supposedly gone on a bike ride that morning and never returned. Her husband, Barry Morphew, said he had left early for a work trip in Denver and was unaware anything was wrong until he got the call. The community in Salida, Colorado, quickly sprang into action. Hundreds of volunteers combed through rough terrain, and law enforcement launched a full-scale search. Her bike was found near a steep ravine, seemingly tossed aside, and her helmet was discovered further down the trail. But there were no skid marks, no injuries, no blood. It looked more staged than accidental. From the start, Suzanne's disappearance raised more questions than answers. Her phone was never recovered. Her credit cards and bank accounts remained untouched. She left behind her car and all her personal belongings. It wasn't just that she was gone, it was that she had vanished without leaving a single trace. Her friends and family were heartbroken but confused. Suzanne had seemed happy on the outside, posting smiling photos and sharing family moments. But behind those smiles, things were beginning to surface that hinted at hidden turmoil. As the investigation dragged on, detectives began looking closer to home. Barry Morphew's behavior raised eyebrows. He gave inconsistent statements to police, and his timeline on the day Suzanne vanished didn't entirely add up. Data from his truck showed unexpected stops and unusual patterns of movement, especially on the morning in question. He also refused to take a polygraph test. In interviews, Barry maintained his innocence, blaming law enforcement for targeting him without evidence. Yet public suspicion began to grow. People who once supported him started asking difficult questions. Why did Barry seem more focused on clearing his name than finding his wife? Why had he sold off some of Suzanne's belongings just weeks after she went missing? The pressure on law enforcement mounted. Still, without a body or definitive proof of foul play, their hands were tied. Months passed, then a year. Rumors spread online, some claiming Suzanne ran away to start a new life, others insisting Barry was hiding something. The case began to attract national attention. True crime podcasts, YouTube videos, and news specials dissected every available detail. In the absence of hard facts, theories flourished. What made the situation more disturbing was the silence: no ransom notes, no credible sightings, no communication from Suzanne. By May 2021, exactly 1 year after her disappearance, law enforcement made a bold move. They arrested Barry Morphew and charged him with first-degree murder. It was an explosive development. Without Suzanne's body, it was a risky case to prosecute, but authorities believed they had gathered enough circumstantial evidence to paint a chilling picture. The arrest reignited public interest, but it also raised the stakes. Was this finally the moment the truth about Suzanne's disappearance would be revealed? Or was the case about to enter even more dangerous territory, with no guarantee of justice? Barry Morphew's arrest in May 2021 made headlines across the country. After a year of painful silence, the announcement offered hope that Suzanne's case would finally see justice. Prosecutors revealed a 129-page affidavit filled with digital evidence, behavioral analysis, and a timeline that seemed to implicate Barry. They detailed how data from his truck's computer system, phone records, and movements contradicted the story he had told police. Investigators claimed Barry deleted texts, turned off his phone during critical hours, and even tossed trash in various bins across towns on the day Suzanne disappeared. But what stood out most was the accusation that he had been having an affair and feared Suzanne was planning to leave him. The theory was simple and chilling: a husband who refused to lose control, who eliminated his wife to avoid the shame of divorce. Despite the public confidence from law enforcement, the prosecution faced a massive hurdle: there was still no body. And in cases without a body, juries demand stronger evidence. Barry's defense team quickly went on the offensive, calling the investigation reckless and emotionally driven. They accused police of tunnel vision, claiming the case had been built on flawed assumptions and digital breadcrumbs that didn't conclusively prove anything. They pointed to the lack of physical evidence, no murder weapon, and no eyewitnesses. The defense argued that Barry's odd behavior could be explained by stress, panic, and grief, not guilt. In April 2022, just weeks before the scheduled trial, a shocking development shifted everything. The prosecution filed a motion to dismiss the charges without prejudice, meaning they could refile at any time. Their reason was surprising. New forensic evidence was being processed, and they wanted time to pursue fresh leads, particularly in an undisclosed remote location. They assured the public this wasn't the end but a strategic pause. Still, it felt like a major setback. Barry was released from jail, and the case returned to limbo. Public opinion began to divide. Some saw the dropped charges as a sign the case had been rushed from the beginning. Others remained convinced Barry had gotten away with murder. Suzanne's family, desperate for closure, remained quiet as the legal back and forth dragged on. Barry filed lawsuits against officials claiming his rights had been violated and that he was being targeted unfairly. Meanwhile, Suzanne's daughters stood by him, saying they believed in his innocence. The case, once so clear-cut in the eyes of many, was becoming increasingly complex. In the absence of courtroom drama, the story shifted back to speculation. Online communities dissected every new detail, desperate for answers. The pressure on investigators remained high. People wondered why, with so much digital evidence, there had been no conviction. Had Barry truly slipped through the cracks of justice? Or was he wrongly accused from the beginning? As 2022 ended, one thing was certain: the Suzanne Morphew case was far from over. Something crucial was still missing, and no one knew when or if it would surface. The breakthrough everyone had been waiting for came in the fall of 2023, more than 3 years after Suzanne Morphew disappeared. It was not the result of a police search or a new witness stepping forward. It was entirely accidental. A group of hikers exploring a remote, forested area in Saguache County stumbled upon what appeared to be human remains. They immediately contacted authorities, who secured the area and began a detailed recovery operation. The location was rugged and isolated, over an hour's drive from the Morphew home, and not a place easily accessed without knowledge of the terrain. Days later, forensic analysis confirmed what many had feared but suspected all along: the remains belonged to Suzanne. The discovery reignited the case in a way that no piece of digital data or circumstantial evidence ever could. Investigators now had a body, but it wasn't just that Suzanne had been found. It was the condition of her remains and the objects discovered nearby that brought a chilling new layer to the mystery. Scattered near the burial site were items that connected directly to her, including damaged fragments of clothing, a necklace she was often seen wearing, and other personal effects. The bones, though weathered and partially exposed due to animal activity, showed signs consistent with a violent end. Though exact cause of death was difficult to determine due to the decomposition, investigators suspected foul play immediately. But perhaps most revealing was the forensic environment surrounding the remains. Soil samples showed signs of recent disturbance, indicating that the area may have been dug up and altered months after the initial burial. Experts believe the body had been moved at least once, possibly to hide it from an ongoing search operation or as a result of the killer fearing discovery. This detail pointed to someone who had intimate knowledge of the area and who had kept a close eye on the investigation as progress. That significantly narrowed the pool of potential suspects. The location of the remains raised further suspicions. Barry Morphew had once worked in landscaping and was known to frequent remote areas for both work and recreation. Investigators reviewed GPS data again and found that one of Barry's devices had pinged near the region in the days following Suzanne's disappearance. At the time, it had seemed like an insignificant detail. Now it looked like a potential smoking gun. Additionally, trace evidence recovered from the burial site, including mineral deposits and plant matter, appeared to match samples found on Barry's property and clothing at the time of the original investigation. The discovery of Suzanne's remains changed everything. What had previously been a case built on patterns and behavior suddenly had a physical foundation. Law enforcement reassembled their timeline, this time bolstered by geography, forensic science, and the unshakable truth that Suzanne had not left voluntarily. She had been hidden, her story buried in the wilderness for years. And now, finally, investigators were ready to bring that story back into the light and hold someone accountable for what had happened. In April 2025, almost 2 years after the charges against Barry Morphew were dropped, and over 4 years since Suzanne vanished, law enforcement made a stunning move. Barry was arrested again. This time, the evidence had evolved far beyond digital traces and speculation. The discovery of Suzanne's remains had breathed new life into the case, and detectives, now armed with physical proof, were prepared to present a case far more compelling than before. The Ray arrest came with multiple charges, including second-degree murder, tampering with a deceased human body, and evidence tampering. It wasn't just a repeat of the earlier allegations, it was a reconstruction of the truth, built on new forensic science, witness testimonies, and a clearer timeline. The case against Barry began with the GPS evidence once seen as inconclusive. Upon closer analysis by advanced forensic mapping teams, Barry's truck showed a pattern of stops that aligned disturbingly well with remote locations surrounding Saguache County. These weren't routine stops. The data revealed periods where the vehicle was stationary in uninhabited areas, sometimes for over an hour. One of those coordinates was less than half a mile from the site where Suzanne's remains were discovered. Adding to this, forensic geologists found soil particles embedded in Barry's hiking boots that matched the unique mineral composition of the burial area. It wasn't the kind of dirt found near his home or job sites. It was specific, rare, and tied him directly to the location. Investigators also unearthed deleted location data from Barry's phone, revealing that he had returned to the general area weeks after Suzanne was reported missing. What had previously been assumptions had now hardened into evidence. The most devastating piece of the puzzle came from Suzanne's own digital footprint. Technicians recovered a deleted note from her cloud account never seen during the original investigation. It was dated just days before her disappearance. The note wasn't dramatic, but it was deeply personal. Suzanne wrote of feeling trapped, of fearing Barry's mood swings, and of preparing to separate from him. She mentioned being afraid of how he might react. The contents of that note painted a haunting picture of a woman on the edge of reclaiming her life, unaware that she might not have the chance to follow through. More disturbing were the new testimonies investigators had gathered. A man who had previously worked with Barry in construction told police that Barry had asked him for help moving several sealed bags in the back of a truck shortly after Suzanne's disappearance. At the time, the man didn't question it, but after learning about the burial site and the reopened case, he felt compelled to speak up. The implication was clear: Barry may have moved Suzanne's body in an attempt to keep it hidden. This new wave of evidence was far stronger than what the prosecution had the first time. The community once again turned its attention to the case, this time with more certainty than suspicion. It appeared the truth was no longer hidden. Barry Morphew wasn't just the last person to see Suzanne alive. He was now the man law enforcement believed had carefully planned, executed, and concealed her murder. And this time, there was no margin for doubt. Barry Morphew's second trial began in June 2025, under intense public scrutiny. The courtroom was packed, media outlets, legal analysts, and residents of Salida all watching closely as prosecutors laid out a case they believed was now too strong to ignore. The mood was different this time. There was no longer speculation about whether Suzanne was truly dead. Her remains had been found. Now, the trial was focused on who was responsible and whether the evidence was enough to convict Barry of the crime so many believed he had committed years earlier. The prosecution opened with a timeline reconstructed from GPS data, cell phone records, and forensic discoveries. They demonstrated Barry's truck movements on the day of Suzanne's disappearance, highlighting unexplained stops, irregular routes, and the lack of activity on his phone during key hours. They introduced Suzanne's recovered note, portraying her as a woman quietly planning to escape a toxic marriage. Jurors listened as experts testified that the soil and plant material found on Barry's belongings matched those at the burial site. The forensic scientist who analyzed the decomposition patterns explained how Suzanne's remains showed signs of having been moved, a detail that only someone with ongoing access and knowledge of the area could manage. But the most compelling moment came when prosecutors revealed a key piece of physical evidence that hadn't been disclosed until the trial: a partial fingerprint found on the damaged piece of Suzanne's necklace recovered near her body. That fingerprint, confirmed through multiple lab tests, matched Barry. His defense team quickly argued contamination or transfer, suggesting that Suzanne could have been wearing the necklace from earlier days. But the timing, location, and fact that the necklace was found deep in the woods near a makeshift grave made that explanation seem thin. Barry's attorneys worked hard to dismantle the prosecution's narrative. They called attention to the lack of direct witnesses, the inability to determine an exact cause of death, and the years-long delay between Suzanne's disappearance and the discovery of her remains. They tried to raise doubt around every piece of circumstantial evidence, arguing that the data could be interpreted in multiple ways. They pointed out that Barry had always cooperated with certain parts of the investigation and painted him as a devastated husband caught in a tragic situation. But the prosecution had more. A second witness, a local utility worker, testified that he'd seen a man resembling Barry walking alone in the woods near the burial site months after the searches had ended. He hadn't thought much of it at the time but had recognized Barry's face during the trial coverage. The witness's account, though brief, reinforced the theory that Barry had returned to move or conceal evidence. After 5 days of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty of second-degree murder and evidence tampering. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Barry showed no emotion as the judge read the sentence. For Suzanne's family and supporters, it was a long-awaited moment of justice. The trial had revealed a chilling truth buried not only in the mountains of Colorado but also behind the carefully constructed image of a grieving husband. The silence that had haunted Suzanne's case for years had finally been broken.